Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I'm very glad that you're here tonight. It's good to see this room full. It's an important issue. I've been in Bible study, I think, most of my life, so I was actually taught how to do a prayer. I'm going to follow the method called ACTS, which is adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. This is the way the Bible teaches Christians to pray. So if you would please join me. Lord, we appreciate all the things you provide to us. We appreciate the people in this room, and we certainly appreciate this wonderful planet that you've given to us for stewardship. We confess that we aren't always the best stewards, and flooding is a really great example of not being a good steward. I give thanks not only for the blessings that we have in this city and the blessings of our military, our police, our law enforcement, first responders, all those people who go out of their way to help others. That's a blessing, and they do it because you showed us how. And lastly, we ask for your guidance to help not only those that are in positions of authority, but each of us to do a better job and to emulate the characteristics of kindness and forgiving and treat each other with respect. You gave us those examples, and we ask you to provide that to us in your name, not just this evening, but as we go out of this room and interact with others. Thank you so much. Amen.
Amen. Now, Vice Chair, will you lead us in the pledge?
You would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight. My name is Diana Howard. I am the chair of the VBTP party, and I was told that we are being live streamed on Facebook tonight, so please engage. You've already met our Vice Chair, Mike Barnaby. We also have our Secretary, Lynn Ure, who's over here. Our Treasurer, Don Roby, who's in the back. Our Membership Chair, Teresa, if you need to see her, she's over there. Our Master at Arms, Larry Horn. And we already met our Transportation Chair, Reese Freeman. Tonight we have the honor of having Councilman John Moss, one of the dynamic duo who put forth a budget without raising taxes or fees and prioritize spending on what we need and not what they want. Jessica Abbott is also with us tonight for the same issue. I was just going to say she was going to be late because she had another meeting at 6:30, but she is here. So, with no further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speakers, John Moss and then Jessica Abbott.
How you doing? Good. Good to see you. Grab a chair.
I was going to have the ladies go to the lake, but you want to do it.
I did, like I always try to do when I go to a meeting, if everyone didn't get one of these and sit in the back of the group, just a short little handout. It's a one-pager that kind of explains how I approach issues. But I thought I would open up with the quotes. I put this on my Facebook and someone said they should read this before every city council meeting. So I thought, well, maybe it would be appropriate today. And this is a quote from James Madison. It came from the Virginia Declaration, Section 1, which actually predated the adoption of the Declaration of Independence in the Constitution of the United States. And it read that all men, and I'm sure they meant men and women, that all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot, by any compact, deprive or divest their posterity, namely, the enjoyment of life, liberty, with the means of acquiring and possessing property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. And what a great lead-in to City View 2. Because City View 2 involves taking your property, not for a public purpose, but to give it to someone else for a private purpose. That's what City View really is. You can put all the niceties, how beautiful it is, how it looks, how it contributes to urbanization and attracting millennials. But you know, as I often said, our parents tell us, the ends don't justify the means. And no private property owner has an entitlement or an expectation that someone else should be deprived of their property to enhance their own. And no government official that does that, in my opinion, is basically, that is legitimate theft. Because they are depriving you of your property, something that is inherently your right. Government didn't give you the right. God did this, our Creator did, and we're taking your property for a non-public purpose. But a little bit about City View, because someone asked the question, isn't City View really a tax increment financing district within a tax increment financing district? And is anyone here familiar with what that is, or what I did? Pretty much, I don't want to bore people. What basically is happening here is, you know, at Sandbridge is a TIF to replenish the beach. They pay the taxes that replenishes the sand. And in fact, Sandbridge has a greater taxable assessed value than Town Center. And Sandbridge, unlike Town Center, generates between $5 and $8 million of excess revenue every year, which we use for schools and other stuff. There's a real dividend that comes from on top of all the other revenue it generates. Not a single dollar of real estate taxes has yet been yielded for the general fund from the Town Center, but we have yielded the need to buy $1 million fire truck, $1 million worth of labor, and extra police officers, and a fire station, and a whole bunch of things that we didn't need, none of which the real estate taxes from Town Center paid for. But all the real estate taxes after 1999 valuation go into this TIF fund to pay the debt service for the public parking garages and the other amenities in Town Center. Well, what they're doing in this case is, because if it's approved, we hope it won't be, but when it's approved, the taxes that City View 2 pays goes first to the city. We appropriate it to the Development Authority, and since it is over and above what they need to pay the debt service, they're entering into an agreement with City View 2 to rebate their property taxes, not to exceed $10.2 million, but all that they pay in each and every year until they get the $10.2 million. Now, there's a slight little pause in here, is all the valuation that increased in that property, that's at the end of Constitution at Bonnie Road on both sides. You see that little construction trailer, that's part of it, and it's also on the other side. That still goes into the fund to pay the parking garages and the core of TIF. But this new building, $60 million worth of high density, apartments and hotels and office and retail, like we don't have enough apartments and offices and retail in the city, a lot of leased space, that would be about $60 million. So roughly speaking, assuming all that was accessible, that would be $600,000 a year for development. But they would get that back each and every year until they get $10.2 million. And you often hear the argument, but for taxes. You're always hearing that argument, but for this development, we wouldn't have these taxes. Yeah. But not for that development, that revenue would be going to some existing business. Because the city's GDP is not growing faster because of that. So this is really a redistribution of income that's already being spent, that's being moved to this location. The only way that could be true is if we had tremendous apartment shortages, which we don't. We don't have a shortage of office space. There's that H.P. Craig building that's open. There's a new building on Independence. You can look all over the boulevard and see leased spaces everywhere. So in reality, we're giving this developer a competitive advantage against existing businesses to redistribute income that's already being received and going into the general fund, now goes and appreciates his property, and we paid for it. Why? This is just not morally or ethically right. It's legal. I've often said what's legal is the lowest standard of behavior, and I think you should expect something more of your elected officials than us. I'll answer questions. But I do encourage people. I think the 8 people or 9 people who came down last night and spoke, they were very eloquent. Karen, you were great. Is she here tonight? I saw her here. She was great. She basically said they were disrespecting how hard we work, and to vote for this would be shameful, and she's right. I would encourage everyone who's here tonight to show up on the 15th at 6 o'clock. They probably won't change their vote, but silent is consent, and they need to know they are doing something wrong. And they are. This is highly objectionable. It's a bad trend, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen. But I understand we can't change that until another election, but that's important. I'm now going to turn to the field house, the arena and field house. I'll come back and take questions.
Questions at the end.
Right. I'm just going to cover these 2 points really quick. The arena has still not, I talked to the city attorney today, they have still not closed on the final financial terms with their lenders. If they can't do that by the 7th of September, the deal should be ended. I won't vote for an extension. I didn't vote for an extension the last time. I won't vote for another one. It'll be over. Hopefully they'll get their act together. So that's where the arena stands. It's all in United States Management Court to have a final sealed deal and a check, I would assume. Now we get to the field house and the parking garage. The field house is a facility that they have put out a solicitation for a public-private partnership. We love those. And so it's out for 90 days for people to put in proposals, and then of course the staff's going to evaluate those and bring those back sometime after the first of the year with a recommendation as to what if any of those proposals we should pursue further. It involves 12 basketball courts, 24 volleyball courts. It would be located at the west end of the pavilion where that parking is, at the end of the west of the pavilion between there and the hotel. And therein lies the problem, because if you take up that space, about somewhere between 550 and 695 parking spaces, those parking spaces have been contractually, assuming the deal gets consummated completely, to the arena to use for their events. So they would have to be replaced. Well, lo and behold, now they're telling us, well, that would require a structured parking garage to replace not only the spaces that we lost at the arena, but also the spaces that would be required for the field house. But also they want to make it even bigger. They're talking about 2,100 and something spaces and $38 million. I can tell you what, I'm not voting for that under any conditions, nonetheless. No matter what the story is, nor am I supporting the field house. But that is now in play. You probably heard in the paper, unbeknownst to 6 council members at least 2 who cared more than some others, that the city manager was behind the scenes having discussions and informal negotiations to build it on a sole source basis. With the same people doing the pavilion because nobody else can build parking garages. Really? Or it would be so conflicting with the arena site that they couldn't have 2 contractors in the same space. I'm just telling you, where that parking garage is and that parking lot is, that dog don't hunt, to be polite. So I'm not buying that either, but apparently there aren't 6 people who are so disgusting they're willing to send that guy home, which I think is where he should go. But that's for another day. So that's where we are with that. That's kind of like around next year, kind of for decisions. But nonetheless, a lot of activities going on to kind of like shape the final point, so at the end there'll probably be no decision. But reality, and why is that important? When Jessica and I proposed last May 5th, well before that even, because we gave council plenty of time to look at it, how we could solve and address flooding in all 6 neighborhoods, and do it in 6 years, which I believe is possible, and without raising taxes, and without having a stormwater management fee increase. This was all doable. This was fully executable, and they never said it couldn't work. They came back that day, and the city manager said, "Oh, Mr. Moss, if we issue all this debt, which was less than the city's per capita debt policy, our bond rating will be affected. We'll lose our AAA bond rating." Really? That's the first time I've ever heard that we adopted a debt policy that if we used it, would lower our debt rating. And every meeting since then, I've been asking them, well, then how much of this $3,000 can we borrow? per capita without injuring our bond rating. Still don't know, but what that means is that debt is our most critical and scarce asset. So no matter how you pay for debt, if I use the debt to pay the $38 million garage, that's $38 million I don't have for flooding. I don't care where the money comes from. It's my most limiting asset. And I think our number one priority, besides public safety, which you can say flooding is part of that, is dealing with flooding. Now, to close out, take a few questions. When we were getting the presentation on Asheville Park, the city manager, you can watch it on tape, it was beautiful, because I commented on it, says, well, we'll have to do this in phases because we don't have enough money. So already, they have an executable plan that they could do faster, except they don't have money. Well, that's because he proposed a budget that put other stuff ahead of dealing with people's public safety, and I guess his house isn't flooding. My point is, it validated exactly what Jessica and I are saying. Putting in piping and curbing and guttering is not high science. Who goes build a subdivision and says, I need 15 years to develop the drainage plan for my new development? No one. It's just bogus. In fact, the very staff that's telling that fact is the very staff that accepted a $35 million liability when they accepted Sherwood Lakes and Asheville Park that did not meet the standard when they were accepted. And you, the taxpayer, get the bill, and everyone is still on the payroll. Where in your company would that happen? Where would that be tolerated? Only in the city of Virginia Beach. Now, I admit they've done a lot of work to clean up their act, but there's no accountability for what now is a public liability that never should have happened. With that, I'll do maybe 15 minutes of questions, and I'm going to last some time for Jessica. Start here, and I'll go there, and I'll go with yes.
This loan for the MGM company, is that it? MGM?
USM, United States Management.
Yeah, those guys. Are you trying to get this money from foreign banks like China was mentioned one time?
This Wells Fargo is the primary place that's providing it. No.
Chase.
Chase. Is it Chase?
It's JP Morgan.
JP Morgan, excuse me, JP Morgan is the source of the money. $170 million with other participants, I'm not going to read this disclose. Yes, sir.
John?
With the hat.
From what I understand, and I've been trying to follow this while working 65 hours, 70 hours a week, the city view is hinged upon, it's predicated on we will get parking spaces. It will allow parking for people to walk down the town center and use all their beautiful retail and whatnot. For 10 years, they are basically getting back taxes that they pay on their property the way you described it, am I correct?
They're getting 100% rebate on their property taxes annually till it meets $10.2 million.
So if I roped off a few spaces in my backyard and let people park there, and walk to Farm Fresh, could I keep my property taxes for the next 10 years?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the parking. It's 128 hotel rooms, if I remember correctly, you said that last night.
And it's 448 units.
And then apartments.
Yeah.
So if you add up, when you add up all, you're assuming that an apartment rarely has just one car. And a hotel room always has a car. And you start adding it up, you realize that they have too many parking requirements at the end of the parking garage, and somehow it's been sized at much less than that. And everybody who creates a business with office and retail requires to provide parking. He isn't providing anything that any other business wouldn't have to provide. So when he says, we're providing an amenity, that's like going down to the Cinema Cafe at Pembroke Meadows Shopping Center and saying, they're providing an amenity because I can park before I go to the movie theater. They have to provide parking no matter what. And I would argue, Jessica brought it up first to her credit, is that the parking that they size is insufficient for what they're building.
Can I add?
Please do.
I'm actually dealing with a local business owner that expanded their restaurant 150 square feet and was required to add another 15 parking spaces as a result. So there's a different standard for parking in the city if you're a small business owner.
So the whole parking thing is just bogus to start with.
And what's stopping them from charging after 10 years? It's going to remain in a public.
Well, if it's a private garage, what they're really saying is 150 of the spaces will not be reserved. That's all they're really saying. That's like any other business. I'm going to tip this side and I'll come back to this side. This side. Then I'll come back to you. This side. You got a question?
I almost know why. They can build a arena, but they can't make that like a boardwalk.
Build the arena and what?
Build an arena,
The lights on the boardwalk.
you can't make the like on the boardwalk.
Well, I could spend a lot of time on lights and work. That's fundamentally that the electrical system that's in place, giving the change in the code. Once we go to repair it because of salt intrusion, we now have to meet the higher standard that is now in place. And we're not even certain that at the high.
Come on, $1,000. The arena is $170,000.
You asked me what the issue is. I'm just trying to tell you what the issue is. And we want to do a pilot to ensure that if we think what will work, will it survive in the salt water spray environment? And if it can't, we probably will not redo the lights. We'll probably look to something different like a laser show or something of that nature, because I'm surprised that someone didn't get electrocuted, to tell you the truth, when you heard the story. And heaven forbid that would have happened, because we all would be paying a check out of risk management. Right here, yes, ma'am.
What have they provided you in the way of traffic abatement? Because Bonnie Road is one of the most congested roads, trying to get on the interstate at Independence. Independence backs up, there's several lights. You're talking about adding 400, 500, 600 people, households, hotels. So what are they going to do? Because we don't have the roads and the infrastructure, but we're going to build all this because we can't live without it. And those of us who live around here just constantly have traffic issues and accidents because it's so congested.
Here's the trick. This vote is not a rezoning. That property was rezoned over 13 years ago. This is only about the proposal to rebate their taxes. But why this is important? Because they're claiming without this $10.9 million, the project, as it's stated, would not generate sufficient cash flow, this is my words, but let's say, to their equity investors and cover all their costs. And they'd have to build a less, in matter of fact, he's publicly said this, a less dense suburban style development. I say, bring it on. Bring it on.
That'd be great.
So what I want you to understand is the vote is all about the $10.9 million. But think of it. Interest rates have never been lower. Corporate earnings have never been higher. So if they can't make that project go without $10.2 million of corporate welfare, it shouldn't happen. Right. You have other people on council, I call them the social engineer land planners, and have the visions that we all should be urbanites and we can't wait to be New York City or Singapore or some other place we all moved away from or don't want to go to. But this is the price that we're paying for that vision of urbanness. And they're more than willing to put down your money as they get their $1 million farm subsidy and live in the rural part of the city and then jam us up with density. But that's why more people need to be there on August 15th telling them, do I think it's going to change the votes? You just have to go to VBTP.org and look where the money came from and where that money goes. And I think it's going to be hard to undo that. Look who brought that to the table, the Development Authority. I have asked to get the public disclosures, financial disclosures for all the Development Authority people. I'm going to analyze that and then make that public so people can see how it's connected to the people who are connected to City View, just for education. Won't change anything, but I think you all deserve to know, and no one ever talks about that. This gentleman right here, and I want to get next one more.
I'm just curious, my first visit here, and I'm listening to you. What is the proposed revenue if it's a success at City View?
Well, here's the part that's important. They are showing revenue, but the issue is there's an economic term called displacement, meaning if the overall economy is growing the same, and they're even admitting that this isn't going to be boosting economic development in terms of increasing our top line revenue growth, the facility is just taking revenue that's being spent one place, and now it's being spent at another, because hey, I can go get in the town center area, get an office space at the same price I can pay over where I can out trash more, and have all this. But it's the same office rent. It's cheaper because why? That guy over there is paying his property taxes. He's paying for his parking. He's paying for his drainage. He didn't get any increased density. So you're really robbing Peter to give Paul a revenue stream. I mean, this makes no sense. Another hotel? The average occupancy rate in the city is 65%. We're spending money, allegedly, on the field house to fill up hotel rooms, but we're given a subsidy to create more hotel rooms? I mean, I don't pass the smart test. Let's see, I'm trying not to move around. Someone who doesn't ask a question in the very back with that.
Hi. Thank you for coming in and explaining all this to us. When you present to other members of City Council your objections to these, just like you are doing here tonight, what do they say?
Well,
Here he goes again.
we share this, it's not just myself, it's Jessica and Bobby Dyer as well. When the three of us share this with our peers on City Council, what is their response?
Nothing. Turn to Facebook.
Deafening silence. You can watch it on TV.
Jeez.
There is no viable economic explanation, and I asked the gentleman, Mr. Huthwald, when he came up, I said, can you please share with me the economic rationale that you believe entitles to you $10.2 million tax rebate for a competitive advantage? And his whole answer was about how wonderful the project was and how long they've been working on it, what they've been doing for it.
Wow.
But the bottom line was, there is no explanation. This is financial contributions and might make right in something I call fatal vision of urbaneness, and we're being forced to pay for it. And until you change who sits there, you can just expect more of the bad medicine. It's just unfortunate, but we get no response. It's like, if they don't engage us, then it doesn't get to become a debate, and it doesn't draw attention, and maybe people will forget. I got 3 minutes. I'm going to try to show them the back.
Sean, just got a quick, walk me down the timeline real quick with the arena, okay? What I'm hearing in my mind is if the arena gets approved or gets their financing and they start building, and then we say we're going to put a field house, then that garage is a given. So the field house needs to be the first thing before the arena, but we can't do that now.
Well, the point you make is the timeline is basically the arena. If they meet their terms, the arena thing contractually is self-executing.
Right.
So it's on its own self-executing package. So if they do that, and then we decide, and Jessica and I mentioned this, the first decision has to be made is a parking garage. You can't make the field house decision until you make the parking garage decision. Right. Which now they're trying to figure out some way they can pay for it. And my point is, it's $38 million of debt that should be reserved for flooding projects. And we shouldn't be borrowing for the field house, and we shouldn't be borrowing for a garage. We should be reserving our debt capacity to deal with people's homes and keep them dry as we can. I'm going to take one question in the back of my time. I'll take you here.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, first of all, when they dug my court up, it took them, what, 8 months, 2 trips to replace a pipe. They actually put a sleeve in. And the man that was there was saying that it was made out of cement. And when you lay cement in water, because when they opened up mine was crushed. There was no pipe. And they said that when it sits in water like that, that it dissolves after a while. So is there a plan of maintenance that we can find out how often do they come out? Are they going to spot check now that they found this? When they found the mistake in the pipes on Rosemont Road, are they going to check that out? And secondly, a lot of people have asked me what they can do, because when you go to city council meeting, they do what they want anyway. So what can the public do to stop that from happening?
Well, the first part I have to back you, because I know a lot of stuff. I don't know execution details of which you've asked me, but I will certainly learn those. I just don't have them off the top of my head. And I try to speak from what I know confidently. So your other question is, it's always true when people say there's nothing I can do. I've always believed one person makes a difference. That's how I got on city council to start with. In March of 1985, 5 of us got together and defeated a school, sewer, water, everything bond referendum with $8,000 from 5 people. And we made a difference. Because people understood. Because people have to know. And if they know, they're empowered. So it's one drop of rain at a time. But I can tell you, last November, and I can't explain why, people voted down light rail. Thank goodness. Thank you all for doing that. All the people worked hard on it. But the same people voted back in the people that brought up light rail. So if you're sitting at the other side of the table, you feel what? That your leadership has been validated. I have to accept that. The same people that vote them in, vote me in. So I leave it to you to judge their performance. I just point out
So
when I
maybe
vote the
get
way I
involved.
do. I can explain myself and hold myself accountable to you. You have to hold us all accountable to you. You have to do that. I can't do that.
So we have to work towards 6 votes on city council.
Well, it's like the Supreme Court, 6 makes policy. And the minority just sit there and tolerate. I got to stop because I'm close to 30. But I would like at this point, though, this has been a breath of fresh air, and thank you all for sending help. It's always great. But Jessica has really been, she brings a great insight. She brings a different insight. That's why I think diversity is really important. Hope more young people will run for city council. Either push us out of the way or make us work harder. But it's with great admiration and affection I introduce to you, Councilwoman Jessica Abbott.
I feel like I won an award tonight. Well, thank y'all for coming tonight. I'm sorry I was a smidge late. I actually thought I double booked myself tonight, and then turned out I didn't double book myself. I imagined I double booked myself. I was able to get here way before I thought I would. So, I'm Jessica Abbott. I'm your most recently elected city council person. I think I'm just going to go ahead and pivot off of what John said first, and that's running for city council is all about outworking your opponent. And there's a lot of comments on Facebook, especially if you're on my Facebook or John's Facebook, about we can't beat anybody who sits on council right now because they have too much money and they have big donors. And I was outspent 5-1. I raised just under $20,000 and my opponent raised $123,000. So it's definitely possible. It's just about picking the right race and just working yourself to death and having a really good support system behind you. And I was fortunate that a lot of the people in this room are really behind me. And so I hope y'all are happy with what I've been doing so far. I spend a lot of nights awake worried about that. But John already covered City View 2 pretty thoroughly, but I did want to touch on a couple things that were said in last night's session, because what you may notice about my approach on City Council, I tend to listen a lot before I decide to speak, and that's because I want to make sure what I say is not only truthful, but it's effective. So I have been a little reserved. I'm feeling a lot more spunky now that I've got the first 6 months under my belt. But of all the people that spoke last night on City View 2, the only people that showed up in support of City View 2 were the developers themselves, which I thought was really interesting. And one of them said something that just made my blood boil. And I was this close to overreacting, but I decided, you know what, keep it in, make a Facebook post, or you can say it tomorrow night. But they said that City View 2 makes town center more attractive to millennials. I gotta tell you. How many millennials I got in this room right now? I got one, I got two-ish, 3. I think my husband was here a second ago. So, big common thread, millennials. We hate corporate welfare. That is almost universal. Doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right. Millennials despise corporate welfare. And it makes me crazy to think that somebody could stand up in front of City Council and say that this project is attractive to millennials. At its core, it is literally the opposite. And so, on top of that, it's expensive. Living in town center is not affordable for a person under 35. Working in town center, if you're a small business owner, you are not opening a business in town center. The cost of commercial space alone in this city is enough to consider another city, which ties into our presentation on the Vibe District yesterday, because the Vibe District has an incentive-based system going on, and John even mentioned during council comments that maybe what the Vibe gets in terms of tax rebate, and I actually brought a breakdown of it. They get a 100% B-pole rebate for 10 years, an exemption of building code and zoning fees, partial real estate tax exemption for rehabilitated structures, and live-work provisions. But John mentioned it and kind of beat me to the punch that maybe we should look at implementing that citywide, not only because it's the right thing to do, we shouldn't be giving special incentives to just a small group of people, but perhaps it would spur more young people into entrepreneurship and thus encourage the economy, and, you know, the rest is history. City View 2 does literally the opposite of that. It's regressive. And it's very frustrating to me, but I did just want to make that comment that probably the most impactful thing we can tell people, or tell my generation, is that this is corporate welfare. This is the crossroads where we all have something in common. We don't want wealthy people getting a break because they have the influence to receive it. So, I also did bring a couple things. I know that Dee mentioned she wanted me to talk about flooding. I brought a map of the elevation of that area. I thought it was kind of interesting. This is kind of a broad area, but the blue is a 8 eased up flood zone, which is a special flood hazard zone. Pink is a 2%, or I'm sorry, 0.2% annual chance of flooding, and the white is all preferred. But what I found was really interesting is part of the City View site, this is the digital terrain elevation data. These 2 feet of elevation, 4 feet of elevation. This side's pretty good, 8 feet, 10 feet. But this part of the lot, almost all of it's entirely 5 foot under elevation. But what I really got a kick out of was, last night he said that no part of their property was in a special flood hazard zone. Brace yourself. Now, pink is not a special flood hazard zone, but the blue is. So, I just thought I'd share that with you if you all want to take a closer look at it. Those are the things last night that really bothered me, and I was not quite prepared to berate the gentleman that spoke on behalf of Berkeley People, but I did want to share that tonight. But a couple other things that are going on. I will be bringing my first resolution to council, hopefully with lots of, I guess, co-sponsorship. I'm anticipating that this will not have any kind of resistance, but many of you may have heard there was a survey that went around on Facebook a couple months ago. Several other council people were tagged, but I thought it was a really good idea, and that was an adopt a drain program. And the point of the adopt a drain program would be not to solve flooding, because it certainly wouldn't, but to bring awareness and attention to the issue. Now, this kind of goes back a little further. I heard about this program. San Francisco is one of the cities that really kind of aggressively promoted this program. There's lots of cities in the United States. Most of them are ones that are right around rivers. Not a lot of coastal cities are doing it yet. But after I heard about it, I went and walked my street, and I noticed out of the 6 drains on my street in Indian Lakes, which is a very, very proactive neighborhood. Most of the people who live in my neighborhood are retired and spend a lot of their day manicuring their lawn and cleaning up trash around our neighborhood. So I was really surprised to see that every single drain on our street was blocked by debris. And I thought, wow, if this is happening in my street, it's got to be happening all over the city. Sure enough, everywhere I looked, I drove down the street and there was leaves and trash and clothes somehow. I don't know how people lose their shoes, but they do. All over the drains. And I thought, well, this has got to be simple. This is proactive. Why don't we do our own adopt a drain program? So the whole purpose of this resolution is to encourage that community awareness and try to get people actively looking at this issue. Because I think if more people realize that simply clearing a drain, it won't stop a 250, 500-year storm, probably won't stop a 100-year storm, but it will allow water to flow more freely, and it will make us aware that protecting our infrastructure is very, very important. So I'm going to be bringing that to council. I would be eager to hear your feedback on ideas how to expand the program. I'd really like to look at a commercial element of it so that we can maybe get businesses like City View 2 who they're getting a little break anyway, maybe they can maintain their drains a little better. Involved and proactive in that way too. But other than that, I mean, I did know that a couple people when I walked in said they had some questions about flood insurance. I'm happy to answer those questions, but I don't like to talk very long. I like to listen. So any questions, I'd be happy to take a few.
This question can be for you or Councilman Moss.
All right.
It's a two-part question about City View. When I was looking at the map, and I don't know if either one of you know this, but the City of Virginia Beach bought the Days Inn, and they were going to turn it into a social services building. And then after they bought it, they found out it was in no condition to renovate. And they were going to give it away to the Tidewater Builders Association, and that fell through. Is this property the Days Inn property that we purchased?
I don't think so,
No, they'll talk about the property was bought by the Mental Health Board without us knowing that they bought it. It was structurally defective.
Right.
The people that sold it, I'm glad they sold it. It's not that property. That's on the opposite side of that other hotel between there and McDonald's.
I think that stays in over here, and so the City View property.
It's where Columbus Loop intersects Bonnie Road by Cecil Cutchin's and
Okay, I
Olympic
just
Park.
wanted to know that because it seemed odd to me. And then my other question was, if we move forward and we grant a tax rebate to the developers of City View, does that set a legal precedent whereby future developers can then point to that when they apply for an equal rebate, and the City Council then has to grant that on the basis it would be discriminatory not to provide that? Is that a legal precedent?
I don't think it's a legal precedent, but
It is not. It is totally a discretionary act on the part of the city to do. You're not setting a precedent. I would think that other people within the TIF that build will say, hey, I want the same consideration, but they're not entitled to it, as is not City View is not entitled to it.
Okay, I was just concerned because once you've done that, how do you deny somebody else and they don't come back legally and say, well, why am I not entitled?
If they argue it.
I think the answer to that is that we deny small business owners across the city any kind of tax rebate. So I don't know. John.
All right, so you caught the developer lying to you, and you know that you have the evidence. Now what are you going to do with that?
A very good question.
Thank you, I'm here to help.
I have already written some of the staff and asked them to explain to me what part of, this is where, okay, let me back up. I think when he said that none of his property was in a special flood hazard zone, he meant he was not going to build in a special flood hazard zone. So I've asked staff to give me a overlay on top of this map showing me where these structures are going to be placed, because that might be where he's getting at saying that his property is not on a special flood hazard zone. That said, that development, that close to wetlands, Thalia Creek, all of their pollution is going to run off into the Lynn Haven watershed. Or worse, run the opposite way into Windsor Woods.
Supplemental. Being a civil engineer by degree, I know that if you build on lands adjacent to wetlands, you have an intrusion problem into your foundations. So I'd like to see their plan. You should ask to see their plans for that and how they're going to mitigate that. How deep are they going to have to drive piles, etc. And then the other question, since we know that all this runoff goes into the creek, how are we meeting federal demands for not developing in wetlands?
So the question has been asked, and John, if I'm incorrect on this, I wrote down that all of this was approved a long time.
They have their they do have their Army Corps. How they got all these wetland permits I'm looking into, but they have got all that kind of certification. He mentioned that night they're using porous concrete and porous asphalt, and how they're maintaining all that. I haven't seen the details, but they got those approvals, how they were achieved and when. I've asked for to get copies of all the dates, but apparently they have all the paperwork
The number he threw out was 13 years ago, which I didn't know, and that's still questions that we're asking staff. And maybe he misspoke, I don't know, because this was all during the public hearing that he was mentioning his permits and having all of the approvals. And when I asked staff the question, their response to me was, of course they have all their stuff.
Of course they do.
So.
You should make them show it.
In fairness to staff, I don't think that outside of Councilman Moss, I don't think they're really used to getting council members asking for a lot of documentation. Because getting this was, while they gave it to me as soon as I asked for it, they asked a lot of questions about why I was asking.
Instead of just going and getting.
How about because you're on city council?
About flooding. There's something that I can't understand about, when we talk about the retention ponds, people call them lakes. They're built in every development, at least some of them, maybe some of them they haven't been, and I even called the city, I can remember the person I talked to, and they were talking about dredging them and doing it, but dredging does nothing to increase capacity, it just lowers the dirt underneath. The capacity is whatever the level is. But when you go around to all these different places, in our neighborhood, there's one of them which not supposed to flood over in the College Park Level Green area, we're one of the highest places in the city. Over a couple of years, finally got them to clean it out, drains down pretty good, it's all downhill. A lot of these other places, the levels of these ponds are kept at an artificial level higher than the groundwater level. And that means there's no reserve. Probably the biggest example that I see is Stumpy Lake. Stumpy Lake, I think when they redid the dam, I could be wrong here, I think they raised it up. They did the same thing to the lake in Norfolk, Lake Flyer, whatever they call it around the airport. That dam there is about 6 inches higher than it was. And that's one of the reasons why the neighborhoods flood there. They did it to increase the water for the Norfolk, for the water, what we drink. And so they're complaining that their neighborhoods flood because that water backs up in there. Well, if you were to lower these levels of all these lakes, and I've noticed that when you go down Any River Road by Stumpy Lake, where it goes underneath, there's a weir gate and a mangrove there. I think they're up to road level all the time. Now, if they were to lower all these lakes around here 6 inches, you'd probably get billions of gallons of reserve flooding area. All the stormwaters, I think, drains underneath the city are full right now because there's no place to put the water. And I would say that the bathtub, like I said, the bathtub is full. And if you don't empty it, it's going to overflow every single time it rains. And that's where we're at right now. So if we can't achieve a level where we have storage capacity, then it doesn't matter what you do to the pipes. It doesn't matter what you do to the infrastructure and the drains, because there's no place for it to go. And that would be, I'd love an answer on that. Why are these lakes kept at artificially higher levels, except for aesthetic view, a fountain, a look, or whatever?
Well, I will start very quickly by saying I don't have an answer. I don't know why they're kept. I will say that a lot of the retention ponds are privately owned. Like almost all of them are not maintained by the city.
But they drain into stormwater. They have to go off, they have an overflow, and that overflow is built at a level, make it nice and pretty, instead of maybe a foot lower to drain and get away.
Go ahead, John.
There's a couple of aspects. It all depends which lake you're referring to. Lakes are ponds that are in the Lynnhaven estuary. Some of them were raised to prevent when high tides come in to preclude tidal flooding and then reducing the capacity of the system. So it's a trade-off. You got to find out where that is. Others are driven by the amount of time that you're supposed to, except under big storm surges, to allow the water to be in the lake so that the solids precipitate out, because we are under a consent decree to reduce the suspended solids that get deposited into waterways. And one of the ways you do that is to let the water sit and have more evaporation than flowing, because as it flows over, the solids that come in tend to be on the top. So you're getting an increased suspended solids deposited in the waterway, which puts us in violation of the consent decree, which makes us liable for fines. So a lot of this is all geared to this multi-state EPA consent decree to allow us to meet our reductions in suspended solids going into waterways. I can't say it's true in every case. It's true in many cases, and that's where you'll see sometimes they'll have a standpipe before it can reach up to that level and go over. It just stays in there because they're working off evaporation, because they want
The law now requires that they want you to take care of 100% of your runoff within your property boundaries if possible, and that the water that you deposit into the tributary is supposed to be actually cleaner, or at least as clean as the receiving water it goes into, which has driven up the cost of raw land development about 25%, and in fact reduces the amount of property you can build on by about 25% because of the need for you to take care of all your runoff within your property and clean it to the standard that it's as clean or cleaner than the receiving tributary that it goes into. It's a very intricate circulatory issue, and I can't answer all your questions. It's really case by case by case to know what drove that particular hydraulic engineering solution. And so when it's like your system. You go one thing here, you're creating a lot of other. This is, for a coastal community, that's why I say this is a big bill. We don't have spare money for anything else. This is a big bill that affects everyone, and it isn't going to get any cheaper.
Well, I understand, but I'll say this last thing. And the bottom line is there's really nothing they can do. All this flooding and everything is going to occur because of the government requirement to do what you just said. There's no place to put it.
But under surge, you have surge capacity, you can go to active pumping and pump water out into the ocean, and that is the solution.
You have that capability.
Normally does.
Go ahead.
They're underwater.
If the city was responsible for the drains and they didn't take care of it, why can't people who were affected by flooding, like Teresa and others, get a civil suit and sue the city?
I think anybody can sue anybody, frankly. As far as what you can do on a city level, that would probably be a question I should approach to the city manager. I know that there has been comments made where they've said, man, if people feel like they're getting gypped and continually getting gypped by the city, maybe that will happen. I think the issue could be is that there's federal assistance available when there's a major storm, but I know John said he had a good comment to add to that.
It's like when the garbage truck hit that person, the city has immunity. And unless you can first establish that the city had conscious knowledge of the system and consciously was aware that they knew about the danger and then failed to consciously act and program to take care of it, you can't meet the gross negligence standard that gives you standing to sue because of sovereign immunity. And that is a high threshold to face, and very few people have the wherewithal of dollars, and no lawyer is going to take that on a contingent basis. So while it may be an option, it's not a financially executable option, in my opinion. But that is the threshold you have to face.
So if it happens again, you have proof, because now the city knows.
Well, now the city's saying they're programming and doing what they said a reasonable approach to solve the problem, and they're doing the best they can, and they too are, like act of God, they're going to say, we're doing the best we can. And remember, a lawsuit is just a lawsuit on us.
You're suing yourself.
You're not getting rid of the people that caused the problem. You're just giving everybody a bill and the problem's still not solved. I'd rather say put the money on solving the problem rather than. But I understand the frustration. Believe me, Jessica and I understand. We're frustrated that the other people seem to be less energized about the situation. That's the best way to say it.
Yeah. I talk to the people who filed the claims all day. I'm still talking to those people. So, Robert and Bill.
For Councilman Moss and Abbott, it appears to me that a few years ago, I looked at those site plans, the elevations in that, in the wetlands, that when that bridge was built to extend Constitution, Mr. Moss, reflecting on your memory, was that bridge not built too low and they had to raise it up because as soon as they started putting the concrete in, it flooded over the bridge. Yeah. City engineers built that bridge and they built it too low and it flooded, so they had to raise the bridge up. Sure. Secondly, I live in Green Run. We have 5 miles of canals. They were dug in 1970. There has never been a canal dredged until last year, and there's about 2 to 3 standing inches of water, that's how much sedimentation. You should be down 6 to 8 feet of carrying capacity, exactly what this gentleman talked to. It's finally underway, but it's so past due, and now, as Mrs. Abbott and Mr. Moss mentioned, these other new subdivisions have moved to the front of the table. And the rest of us are, and we're talking about a lot of money now, it's upwards of $40-some million, that they're going to go and get all of theirs taken care of, and we're still going to be over the next 15 years. Something's wrong with that, I guess it's because those homes average, I think, around $500,000. Thank you.
All right. Dylan, and then probably maybe 1. I think we have to stop at 8, so.
Now, I was at the debate meeting with a lot of the rest of you were there as well, and they were saying that they were doing everything they could for flooding. I remember Councilwoman Hensley sitting on top of the podium, as well as Ms. Kane, Council Lady Kane, saying that it's a lie that we aren't taking care of flooding, we are doing everything we possibly can. I look at the budget. I see about $40 million, as Robert so kindly just mentioned, going toward these projects, and they're kind of directed toward, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, or whoever's paying the largest tax largest gets the grease. And these things haven't been dug out in decades. In your opinion, maybe you could decipher for the crowd, when they say they're doing everything they can, when $40 million they just give $10 million to a developer at City View, they just gave about $40 million in incentives and they just tore down a hotel on Rudy Loop. You know, that cost them like $10 million just in demo alone, on top of the money that they spent to buy the hotel. Can you tell me what they mean when they say they're doing everything they can do on stormwater?
So during budget cycle, our vice mayor said something that I was a little surprised he said with cameras on, and that was that he would not shut this city down. And that was directed at Councilman Moss and I's budget. Meaning that us taking that money and putting it towards flooding was somehow shutting the city down. And it's because in their perspective, not having money for developer incentives and the pet projects like the field house and the dome site, that money would not be available. Because it probably would jeopardize our bond rating at that point.
$40 million is a drop in the bucket.
Well, that's what they mean. And so, as far as Asheville Park goes, I think the reason that's getting a lot of aggressive attention is because the city kind of messed up. You know, they did mess up. They released a bond requirement when the engineering was bad. And so, I don't think anybody who suffered flood damage is better than another person. That's just my perspective. And it's very hard to decide who gets to go first. I'm thankful that that was not my sole decision to make, because people in Windsor Woods, my heart went out to them because many of them are not in their homes right now, still to this day. The disaster assistance they received is what they received in the form of a loan, and I don't know if you've ever gotten a federal government loan, that's not fun. If you received a $25,000 disaster assistance loan and you only spent 20 of it, they came asking for it immediately. They want that $5,000 back. And that's parts of the federal disaster relief program people don't know. People don't understand that if you borrow money through that program and don't use it all, or do the repairs yourself and they come in much lower than what it would have done with the contractor, they expect that money back. And then on top of that, once you receive disaster assistance, you're required to buy flood insurance regardless of what zone you're in, and you get it at a different rate as a result. So there's a lot of things happening when you look at Windsor Woods or Asheville Park. Asheville Park's a great example. All of that area is written in a preferred hazard or preferred flood zone. Most of those people did not have flood insurance because they were told when they closed on their house, you don't need it, you're in an X zone. And so from that perspective, I can see why they feel really gypped, because they were told when they bought their $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 house that they were good. And that, you know, I mean, you can blame that on consumer ignorance, but there is information put out by the federal government that does not make it entirely clear as to whether or not you really need it or don't need it. And it's hard because it really just takes the perfect storm, and then you look at Windsor Woods, which is a lower income area. You know, who's to say that they don't deserve first shot at any money that comes down the pipeline? Or if you even look at my district My district was not really talked about at all during the flood conversation. For those of you who don't know, I represent Kempsville, but Kempsville had flooding. I had flooding. My husband and I lost property in Hurricane Matthew. Our neighbors lost property in Hurricane Matthew. We did not have it to the extent of Windsor Woods or Asheville Park. But there's a house at the intersection of Bonnie and Witchduck Road, and they had terrible flood damage. And we don't have a conversation about that. But, you know, as far as prioritizing, I think Asheville Park got it because of the liability on the city side. And I think the reason why we don't have more money going out is because their perspective is that if we were to take all of the available funds and fund flooding fully, is that it would shut the city down. Okay, everybody's hands are up. I already asked the question, so I'm going to skip you, Reed. Yeah, in the very back, black shirt. Yes.
Okay.
Don, sorry. I kept wanting to call you John. I was like, that's not his name.
Thanks a lot for coming out, Councilwoman Abbott. Now, if this has been addressed, just let me know, because I've had to go in and out with a couple of the Tea Party board members to take care of some business and so forth. What is on the board or the table right now with City Council dealing with the 4 or 5 miles of former light rail pathway from Newtown to Town Center and beyond? Is that looking like that's going to be paved over to the bicycle path? Is that still on the possibility of the books for City Council to possibly sneak the light rail back in there? What's going on with that?
I don't think there's technically anything on that. I mean, this is what I've learned in the last couple of weeks, is that apparently there are things that get put on the table without my knowledge. I mean, so to my knowledge, there is nothing going on with the Norfolk Southern right-of-way at this time. I mean, John, have you heard anything?
No. I think the best reason why you're not hearing anything is those 2 quotes in the paper in Coastal Magazine. They haven't given up on light rail. I hope I can join with Jessica and Bobby to really turn that into a bikeway to preclude bringing back the black hole of finances of light rail in UV. But I think they're holding out, hoping that when they finally get it to the base, or wherever they get it to 10 years from now, that they can come back and revisit that. They have long-term strategies. They outweigh us. So the best way is to get something on it as soon as possible.
What about the tax revenue that has already been collected on it?
That all went back to payback, right? That was all paid back. That all went to pay back the state.
Okay.
I will add to the bikeways and pathways, though. If we could find a way for a good price, I've started saying that now because I found that I pitch an idea and then all of a sudden it becomes really expensive and exorbitant and not something that I wanted to begin with. But I think if we could find a way to put a very affordable path down that way, I think that would be something locals loved and used. And that would make them really upset when somebody came back and said, let's put a train on top of it. About the CRS program, I will tell you that it is an extremely long process. It has expenses that are not always...
Well, your city planning department was pretty sure it was like
well,
that happened.
It's not, I looked over the upcoming agenda and it wasn't on mine, at least unless I missed it, but the CRS program, for people who don't know, it offers a discount based on the city meeting certain guidelines and goals and milestones in infrastructure and procedure and policy, and based on where you hit, you get an overall discount on your flood insurance program. I think we're one of the only coastal cities in Virginia that does not participate. However, there was, during the campaign, a candidate that really loved the CRS program, and she made mention a lot of times that it could be up to a 50% discount. Somebody who writes flood insurance all over the state of Virginia, I have never seen a discount above 5%. So it's not a huge discount. I know that Portsmouth is like 3%. So I would say what's probably more likely is would be somewhere between probably 3 and 8% if we met all the guidelines. But it is an extremely long process. It's not overnight. And most of the cities that are in the CRS program today got in the 80s and the 90s. So, Pat.
Jessica. I think everybody in this room would acknowledge they're huge fans of both you guys. And obviously, I think you know you're in a friendly atmosphere tonight. But one of the things that really bothers me, and this isn't a question, this is a Reed-like question that goes on for a little bit. And anyway, kid, I love you, Reed, you know that. But one of the things that bothers me is, you know, I hear you say that, well, I held back. And then I remember when you voted for the arena and how many times you and I faced off up there. And I wasn't always kind to you, but I was respectful. You know, yeah, still a friend. For now, for about 15 more seconds, I'm sure. But I guess what bothers me, I think what bothers us, and yes, it's our fault that there's not more people like-minded like you on city council. But when I hear things like, well, they met clandestinely, which that's not the first time I've heard that. And when I hear things, you know, like, well, I held back. Man, I want you coming out of your chair. And I want you to question rather, because you're so darn nice, which is a great quality to have, except when you're on city council, I think. Which is that, you know, to say that respectful people, reasonable minds can disagree assumes that there are other reasonable minds up on the stage with you.
Right.
And they're not. So until we can get to that point where we have enough people that can do the right thing, and we can support you as best we can, which is spend our 3 minutes of time talking and then being told to sit down when they vote for it. You know, until we do that, you guys got to, I mean, respectfully, if I ever get to Congress and Nancy Pelosi ever calls me a friend on the other side of the aisle, I'm going to go grab her microphone and put it out like a cigarette. Okay? So, I mean, I want you guys coming out of your chairs, and I want you challenging I want you to say, how can you guys, in an open public forum, meet on the side, cut these deals, and not even include us? Are we not members voted like on the city council like you? So, I guess, in closing, Reed, I would just implore, please, God, do something. Come up, you know, put it on that camera there. You guys are smart people. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. So, God bless you, but maybe I got to come out and dive across it. I don't know.
So I know that was more rhetorical, but I will say, last night I went home kicking myself because I really did want to say something and I held back. And I will be the first to admit that I was upset that I did not say what I wanted to say. That said, for anybody entertaining the idea of doing this job, the hardest part of this job is not running for office. It's not having the answers. It's not being able to sit in a room with people you philosophically disagree with. It's figuring out what question to ask. That's the hard part. Because I sit up there and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I can make a good argument why this doesn't make sense, but how do I find the facts? How do I, a person who is, well, it doesn't even matter. I was going to say how old I am, but it's irrelevant because the people who are writing these proposals and these resolutions have years and years and years of experience and know how to keep this from me. I will tell you that I will get better, and I appreciate all criticism very much. And next time I won't hold back. I do genuinely believe that you can gain more in smiles than in anger, so that might just be where we disagree. But yeah, I think you're right on a lot of points. All right, Teresa.
In comments to that, you know, I think that when they ask about when the budget was discussed of 15 to 20 years as opposed to 3 to 6, it shouldn't be a question of can we do it, it's how we do it. Because like hurricane season is upon us. Yep. And there's a lot of people who are flooded are like, is it going to happen again? I've got the same scenario coming. We're in hurricane season. My husband's going in for another knee surgery. It's like deja vu. I'm like, you know, and so people, I never thought I would be anxious, but people are. So it's not a question of don't tell me that you're going to take a lifetime to do it. It's like, how are you you will get it done, and how are you gonna do it? Eliminate all the bureaucracy. It should have never taken 8 months or 7 months for somebody to come in and dig that street up and put a sleeve in there.
I think that.
Yeah, it's all bureaucracy, so you have a whole big mess.
The difference of what, the issue is that what you're talking about is something that happens in business.
Right.
People say, don't tell me why I can't do it, tell me how I can't do it. That's the difference. That's just, I don't know why that is, but that is, so.
We need to like stop and go on to our business meeting, but how many people here flooded? How many people here had floods in their neighborhood? Whether you lost a car, or whether your house flooded? Okay. Yeah, my son's car was in the driveway. I brought a picture to city council of my.
He lives in an RV in his driveway because they're still repairing the.
Okay, ask me the last question because it's almost 4:15.
Could I just ask you a quick question? How could we help you? I mean, everybody here is making.
That's what I was going to ask.
It's like, is it an email? Because I sent an email to everyone on the board and I got a patsy answer. How do we get them? Is it Facebook?
Who's on Facebook?
Next month we'll have.
How many of you on Facebook?
The best thing you can do, I can't really give this to John because John's Facebook is personal, but on my Facebook, go to invite your friends and invite everybody on your friends list to follow my page. And then tell them why they should follow the page. And then go and tell your children and their children that there's corporate welfare happening and they'll be freaking out. That's a great way to help. And be active in groups like this.
Reed, can I just real interject? You brought up the Facebook page. We're going Facebook Live right now, and I've got hundreds of people on here that are watching this live right now. On the first Tuesday of every month, we have open mic in Virginia Beach City Council. That means you can get down there without an agenda item, say anything you want for 3 minutes. But it's after the formal session is closed, all the TV sets are shut off. Here's what I broached the subject with Councilman Moss earlier today. He said, you can do it. Take your phones down, and when you go to talk, videotape it out onto the web. Everybody else that goes to the first Tuesday of the month, when it's closed, let's start flooding the internet with all the scoundrelous things that they're doing down there that they're trying to keep us out of. Sorry, thank you.
So here's my last question, and I'm not going to be as long as Pat.
Yeah. 2 minutes.
In my remarks last night at the open mic, I asked City Council, why don't we use the referendum process that we have? In Virginia, if we issue bonds for any project over $10 million, the city is, or revenue bonds, the city is required to have a referendum to ask our permission. Many of these projects are non-essential, non-required things that are other than flooding. For me to get a referendum takes everyone in this room a year, 30,000 signatures. So can you educate me? What is the process for city council members? What do you have to do to get a referendum on the ballot? How does that happen? Because it would probably be a lot easier for you than it is for us.
Well,
That's my question.
I'll tell you, I emailed Mark Stiles.
It takes 6 votes of city council, that's all. 6 votes of city council, and they take it to a judge.
I didn't even email Mark.
Can I round of applause for?
I just want to close this meeting at 8:30. I just want to say real quick that the reason they dug up mine is to shut me up. So if you were flooding, call or email 100 times Davenport, whole council, okay? We will get it done.
Now, so, how many people here want something done about flooding and are willing to do something about it? And what do you suggest that we do? Does anybody have an idea? Anybody?
Worse than anybody here.
I know somebody had asked about doing a referendum like we did for light rail, right? But that took a lot of work.
Sorry, I kicked your camera.
Hey,
you're fine.
We had
You leaving?
174 people that worked the polls. But the first one, we only got like less than 16,000 signatures. And we had to go to the next poll and get the rest. And in between that, we also did events at the convention center and stuff like that. People walk their neighborhood. So if anybody is interested in doing that, we need to know what it is you want to do. Do you want to work a poll? Do you want to walk your neighborhoods? Do you want to make calls? Do you want to bring attention to this issue? If you had a story to tell like Teresa's where they came out and checked it and her pipes were crushed, and get on Facebook and tell your story and get it out there, because what they said was it takes 6 votes. Next year we will have how many people up for re-election? 6 of them. One of them is John Moss, and hopefully he gets re-elected and you'll all be voting for him. But there are 5 other seats. Does anybody want to run for city council against one of these people? And we all support anybody running for that. Will stormwater be an issue that, you know, we're going to have out there to make sure that we vote in people that are going to take our needs into account and not their wants, and listen to us? Yes. Oh, please. Well, with that, we have to get to the business meeting. So do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Okay, can I get a motion on approving the minutes of the last meeting?
Move, so moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, can we do our treasury report, Don? Where did Don go? Oh, there he is.
I see her. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out today.
And hang out if you didn't order 50/50 ticket, we still have to do that.
Our beginning balance was $1,451.17 since the last meeting of last month. Our ending balance as of today was $1,356.24. Our expenditures were $23.84 to Office Max, $20.17 to GoDaddy, $45 to Constant Contact that sends out the emails and so forth, $14.76 to Facebook, and a $15 monthly fee that I normally take care of out of my own personal pocket because it makes it easier for me to work with Bank of America to do taxes and everything else with. And our deposit was, bring it up real quick, and our last deposit was $213. That was on July the 7th, but that was basically really for the last meeting that we had. So tonight we should be having a pretty good deposit. If you have not re-registered yet, or you have not registered before and to become a member of the Virginia Beach Tea Party, please see the beautiful young lady in the orange shirt there in the back with her hand raised up.
The what?
And please sign up. A yearly membership is $10, and if you want to do more than $10, that'd be greatly appreciated, because every penny that we get from you guys allows us to, pay for these rooms, pay for flyers, pay for guest speakers that comes in, and other things that we need to keep this organization running. So thanks a lot. Appreciate y'all's time, and have a great night.
Do we have any committee reports?
I'm going to waive my committee report.
What?
Yeah! Best thing Reed's ever said.
Wow!
Brought to you by the Virginia Beach Tea Party. Join us, www.vbtp.org.